Welcome to the Smarter Science of Slim, the scientifically proven program where you eat more and exercise less to burn fat and boost health.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Excited and a little scared for today's show. I know that sounds a little bit funny, but our guest is a wonderful guest. But they're a guest that has a name, which I have a hard time saying, and also a blog, which I have a hard time saying. So I'm going to have to ask everyone to stick with me here. I promise if you get through my bumbling, you will be rewarded with a wonderful conversation. We have a trained pastry chef who has found just amazing ways to provide beautiful, whole food dishes that the whole family can enjoy that are gluten-free. And I just think it's great because she shows us how, quote-unquote, constraints in the kitchen can actually lead to wonderful creativity and health. She's won all sorts of awards. She's written the lovely cookbook, Small Plates and Sweet Treats. And of course, she is the author of the award-winning blog, Canal Invani. And she is Aran Goyaga. Did I get even close to it?
That was perfect. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Well, Aran, thank you so much for your forgiveness and for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Aran, well, before we get into your recipes and all this fun stuff, can you tell us a bit about your journey and your story that led you up to this point?
How far should I go? Let's see. Well, I was born and raised in the Basque Country in northern Spain, and I moved to the U.S. when I was 24. And my family has a pastry shop, so I grew up around food and chefs and pastry chefs, and my father's parents were farmers, so food has always been a big part of my life, and cooking and baking. And so I didn't initially go to school for pastry, but after going to business school, and I even earned a master's in business, I decided that I needed a change of careers, and I ended up going to culinary school to pursue my passion in pastry. And I feel at that point when I went to school for pastry in the US, and I think it was kind of the longing for my childhood and things that tied me to my family. And so I went to, I learned from French chefs and flour and, sugar and butter and all these things. And I worked as a pastry chef for about 4 or 5 years before I had a baby. And at that time, with both of my pregnancies, I started to develop autoimmune conditions. First, Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid disease, and then Meniere's, which is inflammation of the inner ear that gives me vertigo. And so I was really sick and debilitated, and I couldn't find any doctors to help me until I found a functional neurologist who is a chiropractor, who suggested that perhaps I have food sensitivities, and he ran a bunch of tests for me, and it turns out that I have genetic gluten intolerance, and that's when I had to make a shift in my diet, which I always felt like I was a very healthy person, and I ate and cooked a very healthy diet, but wheat was making me very sick. So.
And that then took you on this path where you have, and I love this so much. In your book trailer, I think you literally say this or something very close to it. And again, that's the book trailer for Small Plates and Sweet Treats, that being selective about the ingredients you use in the kitchen is not limiting. In fact, it can almost be expanding and spawn creativity, like in writing. If you try to write a haiku and there are constraints, that sometimes actually explodes creativity rather than limiting it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think people have this misconception. You can naturally eat gluten-free foods and savory foods, but for baking, it's a little bit more constraining, if you will, if you want to recreate something that is very specific, like a replica of wheat flour baked goods. You know what I mean? But if you think about it, okay, well, instead of just having wheat flour, I have all these other flours that I can work with. I have different flavors, different textures. And that is so interesting to me. And having been a pastry chef myself and always looking for new textures and flavors, that's kind of what I enjoy doing anyway. So this was actually an awesome opportunity, and I love shopping. So if I'm presented at a if I go to a grocery store and I have all these different flowers to choose from, that's, I'm like a kid in a candy store, because there's so much to play with.
I love it. No, yeah. And Aran, what have you found to be? I know it varies certainly recipe by recipe, and it's hard to say anything that is global. But what are some of the key, like your go-to staples in your kitchen for this gluten-free baking and delicious experience that you provide?
Well, I don't like to use an all-purpose gluten-free flour mix, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but because I just like to play around and I like to experiment, I tackle each recipe individually. And I think, well, okay, so I'm making a tart crust and I'm pairing it with strawberries. Well, maybe I'll put buckwheat in there just because I love strawberries and buckwheat, or, different. I think about different ways, but there is kind of and I wouldn't even say a ratio because that feels very constrictive, but so I do most of the time. I do maybe a third. I'm bad at the ratio thing, but I do about 60% of a whole grain flour, and sometimes it's a mixture. Sometimes it's like super fine brown rice flour and maybe quinoa flour. Although quinoa is not a grain, it's a seed, but that's kind of those flours, and then I incorporate let's say 25% or 30%. Nut flour, and then 10% or 15% of a starch. And that varies, but I do have sort of those percentages in my recipes, I would say.
I think it's so exciting, Aran, because I know some of the listeners to our show, like a lot of people who listen to our show, don't eat any form of starch, and they try to steer away from added sugars and things like that. But what you do so well in your work is you embody how two things. One, food is an amazing thing. Like, it's way beyond just like nutrients, right? It's about bringing family together. It's about ties to your heritage and your history. And it's so unfortunate that we've lost a lot of that in mainstream culture. But in addition, like, if folks just eat food is defined by, like you talk about, things that are in nature, things that are natural, things that are not manufactured goop. You can be surprisingly healthy and happy while enjoying such a diversity of options. And it really just shows how far from just eating food we've gotten as a culture.
Yes, I think, well, I never grew up thinking of food, whether it's healthy or not. I mean, I know that doesn't sound very good, but my family always just cooked everything from scratch. And so we ate lentils and, legumes, vegetables, fish, meat. So we ate lots of different things. We also ate sugar and in moderation. So I never had this thing with food that was like evil or good, or, I never had a kind of an attachment to food in those ways. I never obsessed about it. And I try to think about, just having something healthy and nourishing and full of good properties, but also enjoyable. So maybe my book's not strictly a health book, and I never intended it to be a health book, but I think it's like when people obsess about specific things, and it becomes sort of I don't know how to explain it.
No, the perspective you're bringing her on is perfect. Like, it's literally this crazy paradox we're experiencing. You said it perfectly. Growing up, you didn't try to be healthy. Like, people didn't try to be healthy up until about 40 years ago, when everyone started getting sick and overweight. So, like, they just ate food and cooked at home. Like, that's all they did.
And funny, one thing, my mom worked outside of the house, so it's not like she was home all the time and her only concern was cooking food. But for her, cooking as a good meal was very important. So she would wake up in the morning and she would make lentil soup before she left for work, and then she would reheat it when we all came home for lunch, because at school we actually went home for lunch, had lunch, and then went back to school. So, I mean, I think also the way I grew up in Spain, and it's still the same, was very much centered about having a meal as a family, which happened to be lunch. And so to this day, I do the same thing. If I have appointments or, I try to cook my lunch before I leave the house. So I come home for lunch or dinner, I know there's going to be something there to eat, and I'm not going to be starving and stressed out about what to make. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And I think a lot of people, when they think of cooking, they think of entertaining. They think of, okay, well, I'm going to do a Julia Child, kind of fancy dinner. And it's not. It can be as simple as just braised chicken with some vegetables and, and some green leaves and a salad. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it's having something that you've cooked and it doesn't come from a package or, that's just how I approach it.
And for you,
yeah.
Is it just because you're obviously a very busy woman. You're, I believe, a mother of 2. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So mother of 2, published author. You have this blog. You're a photographer. You're not just like any photographer and blogger. Like this is folks, if you haven't seen Canal Inveni, which is spelled, because I'm probably horribly mispronouncing it, CANNELLEVANILLE, lots of vowels.com. You don't play around. You do high quality stuff. So what is it? Just a matter of priority to make time for food?
I have to admit, I'm also lucky because my life revolves around food. So I'm already in the kitchen as is. I'm not like driving an hour to an office and spending all day in an office. I don't have that kind of life. I am cooking in a kitchen all day. I wouldn't say every day, but yes, I do I spend a lot of time around food. So, and that's what I enjoy. So it's easy for me,
What have you found that other individuals, or have you found, or do people ask you, like, this is all wonderful, you've given me this amazing tool chest, but now how do I actually go use it?
Yeah, and I think that's a very individual thing. And it's, ask me to, I don't know, paint my house or things that I don't enjoy doing. And I have to admit, even going to the gym, it's hard for me to make time for those things that I don't enjoy so much, or, so it's a very personal thing. And I definitely don't judge anybody for not being in the kitchen all day. But it is very important. We definitely believe that we are what we eat, and our minds function according to the fuel that we put in our bodies. So, if there isn't anything more important than that, then I don't know.
Or Aran, I keep going on a tangent, but to answer your question, I think it is about planning. I think it's about, even if you can only go shopping one day a week, make a trip to the farmer's market and get kind of staples and plan, think about, you don't have to cook every day, but maybe you make a pot of soup one day. And I love my freezer and I freeze leftovers. And sometimes I just pull out some leftover lentil soup and reheat it, so it is about planning, I think. And I love I think you do a great job of bringing a couple worlds together. Like whenever I read your work and I see your blog, it reminds me of the simplicity of health and avoiding obesity and diabetes that used to exist, which is just cook food and eat it. And if it isn't something you would recognize in nature, you probably shouldn't put it in your body. But then you also layer on top a bit of the quote unquote modern technological and medical advancements we've had in terms of like avoiding things like gluten, and how you don't necessarily need to turn to frankenfoods. You can just substitute other whole foods, correct?
Yes, and I think there's this misconception that gluten-free diet can be healthy, which it can, but it can also be not healthy, because I think a lot of companies are just jumping on the fad. I don't think it's a fad, but I think, there's such a market that they just want to, okay, well, you're not going to have wheat brownies, but now you can have gluten-free brownies that are loaded with sugar. And, who wants to eat that? It's not about that. And I never even wanted necessarily to make my book about, here's a gluten-free cookbook. It happens to be gluten-free, but It's just about using other things that are, just other ingredients and things that are interesting. And yeah, I can't have wheat, but I can have this other stuff, and I can still be healthy.
Well, I love that. I love that focus on, because we see that all across, for whether it be gluten-free or whether it be low carb or whether it be vegetarian or vegan, where these approaches, which are initially directed at health, then big business gets their hands on them and just makes processed garbage that also fits in that box. So it's like the common denominator is, don't eat processed garbage first. Enjoy food, savor it, savor your heritage, savor that time with your family. Get back to what every person who lived prior to the current generations did. Yes. And you will be surprised at how delicious and healthy your life will be.
Yes. And another thing I wanted to say too is, I have a lot of people that write to me, and they share my same health issues, like Hashimoto's, and they want to know, did I feel better as soon as I gave up gluten? Well, there was a process there. When I was diagnosed with gluten sensitivity, I actually, it's an immune system response. So my doctor suggested that to calm down my immune system, that I had to give up. I almost had to give up everything. I had to do sort of a paleo diet for about 3 months. So I gave up gluten, dairy, soy, nuts, anything that can be allergenic to the body. I had to give up, and then start introducing. So an elimination diet. So for those who are they're giving up gluten for health reasons, you can't just go and say, okay, well, I'm having issues with gluten, but I'm going to go have this like gluten-free bread that's loaded with tapioca starch. Well, that's not going to do anything to you. It's not going to make you feel better either, because you need to really just calm down your body and nourish it with the things that are full of nutrients, and then start introducing the other stuff. So yeah, I don't want to take things lightly and say, oh, I just gave up gluten and I got healthy again. There is a process of thinking about food in a healthy way and nourishing your body. But now I'm, as an everyday cooking philosophy or eating philosophy, I just think we need to eat a variety of foods that are whole, like you said, and the more nutrients, the better. I still eat sugar every once in a while, and I made banana bread yesterday and enjoyed it with my friends, and it had sugar in it. But it's about the balance, I think, and not getting fixated on one thing, because then, I have a very kind of all or nothing personality. So if I do get fixated on something, I'll end up binging, or I'll end up going the opposite way. So it's about trying to maintain a healthy relationship with food too.
So, and again, Aran, that's why I wanted to have you on the show. And folks, again, please do check out Aran's work. Again, that's canalinvani.com, because you can just see the words you use. Like, I just love this. You got to have a calm approach, nourish. It's a process. Think through it. Because if you think just even the vibe, that vibe is not the vibe we're presented with when people generally talk to us about disease and health and obesity. It's like quick fix now, pill, powder, potion, ha, rah, rah, rah. Whereas we see more and more, and you're a perfect example that, man, there is an alternate path that seems so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, and I have to say, and again, I'm not any advocate for anything, or I'm just speaking for my experience, but when I got very ill with vertigo and Meniere's, and I lost my hearing. It was really, really difficult time, and I just had a baby, and I was bedridden every day, like almost every day in bed. So I went to several ENTs, and they just could not help me. All they could do was prescribe pills and like Valium and all this stuff, and I was nursing a baby, so I didn't want to stop breastfeeding just so I could take pills. So I was very frustrated with the whole process. And then when somebody said, it could be your food actually that you're eating, it was like, yeah, of course it is. Why not explore that option first and then see if other things can help me further if this doesn't help, which it did right away. So I get frustrated with the disconnection between medicine and not to say that medicine is not helpful. It is very helpful and it helps a lot of people. But there are certain cases, especially when there are things that are chronic disease and when nothing else helps, why not explore the option of diet and lifestyle and exercise and relieving stress?
And especially, why not when you can see that out the other end, as embodied by your work, is delicious food. It's delicious food. It's not, we're just talking about eating delicious food.
Yeah.
Because I think people have that false dichotomy, right? Where it's like, it's this burden and this drudgery, and I'm going to eat celery sticks and cabbage soup all day. False. False.
Well, when I did the elimination diet, I have to say, it was actually fairly difficult to carry on. I mean, like, that was not sustainable for me because, I want to be able to eat eggs in the morning. And there were certain things I couldn't eat for a little bit. But after that, I mean, I feel better. And and my friends, they can't believe that half of the things everything I make they can't believe that they're gluten-free, or they just have this misconception that it's going to be cardboard-like and just tasteless. And that's not true, because actually, when you start incorporating whole grain flours or nut flours, or using coconut milk, I mean, all that stuff tastes really good. Mm-hmm. So
I love it. Speaking of deliciousness, Aran, what's next for you? Are you just continue to create deliciousness? Do you have other things in the pipe? What's next for you?
Well, my book came out about 9 months ago, and I'm still promoting it, and I have some events coming up. I'll continue to do photography workshops. And I just kind of want to continue doing what I'm doing, which is develop recipes and write about them and photograph them and present them in a way that, gets people in the kitchen and thinking about what they're eating and inspiring that way. So always having that goal, whatever the format may be. But
I love it. Well, certainly a noble goal of helping people to live better lives while eating delicious food. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Listeners, again, we've been talking with the delightful Aran Goyaga. She is the award-winning proprietor of CanelInveni.com, also the author, and I will say this correctly. So you could find this, then you can find everything else. Her cookbook is called Small Plates and Sweet Treats. And if you type that into Google, you'll find all the things I just horribly mispronounced. And I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I did. And please remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Chat with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet.
You can get fabulous free SANE recipes over at carriebrown.com.
And don't forget your 100% free eating and exercise quick start program, as well as free, fun, daily tips delivered right into your inbox at bailorgroup.com. That's BAILOR group.com.